Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Idyli.
And my name is Ilia. We're so pleased to introduce to you our Rebalance and Renew CBT approach to menopause workshop.
In this short video, we'll give you an overview of what this program involves and how it may be helpful to you or someone you know.
In our clinical work, we've seen the many ways that menopause can impact on women, not just physically, but emotionally, socially, and psychologically. What we know is that around 75 to 80% of women going through perimenopause and menopause experience impactful symptoms. About 25% describe these symptoms as severe, and 10% report that the symptoms have led them to leave their jobs. What we understand is that the impact can be significant and often interfere with daily life. And this is what inspired us to do this workshop.
We are both cognitive behavioral therapists with many years of experience across primary and secondary care, and we have a particular interest in women's health. This workshop brings those areas together. It's been designed to help women better understand the psychological effects of menopause and to offer practical strategies for managing symptoms and promoting emotional well-being. If what we share today resonates with you or you think it could support someone else, we'd love for you to follow along with the full workshop series or share it with someone who may benefit.
So, what can you expect from this group? So, this workshop will take place over 6 weeks, each lasting 90 minutes, and will be run by both of us to train cognitive behavioral therapists. It's designed for a small group of 10 participants so that we can create a supportive and a safe environment and a contained space. One of the most valuable aspects of the group is the opportunity for peer support, hearing from others who may be experiencing similar challenges and knowing that you're not alone in it. Because of the small group format, we will be operating on a first come, first served basis. And we'll be holding a small waiting list for future rounds of the workshop. So during the sessions, we'll be focusing on both psychoeducation, understanding what's happening kind of both physically and emotionally during this phase of our lives, and practical strategies to support your well-being. A little bit more detail, the group will cover identifying and managing physical symptoms, self-compassion and acceptance, identifying and managing unhelpful thoughts, managing change, self-perception and identity shifts that we're going through this time, using menopause as an opportunity for growth. We'll talk about this a little bit later on, and developing a more helpful routine that prioritizes your values. And lastly, sleep hygiene and relaxation.
Mm-hmm. Today, we want to introduce you to the key psychological theories that underpin this group and give you an overview of the types of interventions we'll be covering across the 6 sessions. We will also be exploring why cognitive behavioral therapy, or in short, CBT, is particularly well suited in supporting women through menopause, especially when it comes to managing the psychological and physiological symptoms that can often feel overwhelming and isolating.
Right. So what do we actually know about menopause? What we do know is that key hormones like estrogen and progesterone start to fluctuate. And because of that, a number of physical symptoms are triggered in our bodies. Some of the most prominent symptoms include hot flashes and night sweats, brain fog, muscle aches and pains, and sleep disturbances. But what's also important to recognize is that the difficulty of menopause is not just because of these hormonal changes. It's because of the impact of these physiological symptoms on our daily lives. the way they interfere with our functioning, our confidence, relationships, and emotional well-being. And that can be challenging. So we also know that hormonal changes during menopause don't just affect the body. They can significantly affect mood and emotional regulation. And we also know that fluctuations in serotonin and dopamine due to these hormonal shifts can also cause mood swings, anxiety, low mood, and increased irritability.
A concept we found particularly interesting when we were doing the research and we were developing this program is something often referred to as mommy brain. This idea is usually discussed in the context of early motherhood, where shifts in hormone levels support behaviors like multitasking, empathy, and the instinct to keep the peace in the household. What we've come to understand is that during perimenopause, as hormones fluctuate, this mommy brain response can become deactivated. That doesn't mean, of course, women stop caring for those they love, but it often coincides with a shift in focus, a shift towards prioritizing the self. And for many, this may actually represent kind of a rebalancing. After years of putting others first, menopause offers an opportunity to pause and ask, what about me? In this way, perimenopause and menopause can be a pivotal phase, an invitation to reevaluate personal priorities, reconnect with what matters most, and begin shaping a life aligned with one's values and goals.
And in many ways, this is exactly the stance we want to keep for this workshop. A space where that there's room to talk openly, not just about the practical challenges, but also the emotional ones, sometimes linked to shifts in our roles or identities as women. The grief, the confusion, or the loss of identity, sometimes that we can experience, and the changes in how we understand our womanhood and our roles in this phase in our lives. But just as importantly, we want this to be a space where problem solving, for developing strategies, and for reclaiming a sense of direction in our lives, to explore how this stage can be one of growth and clarity and self-defined meaning.
Sometimes in clinical practice, women ask, if I do these strategies, will my symptoms go away? And it's such a valid and understandable question, especially when symptoms are having a real impact on daily life. The reality is that the symptoms can't go away. You're not going to be cured of menopause. But what we can safely say is that they can become less distressing, less overwhelming, less disruptive in how you live your life.
So let us show you a little bit in terms of how it works. So one of the ways that we can explain this is through something called gate control theory of pain. This theory was first introduced in the 60s. And whilst it's not new, it's incredibly relevant today. In simple terms, it tells us that pain isn't just a physical sensation. It's also influenced by psychological factors like attention and mood and beliefs about what this pain means for us. So these other factors can either open or close a gate in our spinal cords that modulates the pain signal going to the brain. And hence, pain can either be experienced more or less heightened. And this is how we understand the physical discomfort associated with the physical symptoms of menopause that can either be keenly felt or more diminished, depending on what's happening in those areas like attention. And the brain can either amplify the physical discomfort or dampen it.
So I want you to think of a really simple example. Imagine you're walking around and you step on a nail. It goes through your shoe and you're injured. Understandably, in that moment, all of your attention goes straight to the pain. Now imagine something else happens at the same time. You hear a scream from a loved one in another room, or if you're outside, a car suddenly swerves towards you. In both of those situations, you're going to run without thinking about the pain in your foot. Your brain temporarily redirects your attention away from the pain to focus on a bigger threat in front of you. That's part of what the gate theory helps us understand, how the intensity of physical symptoms can be amplified or reduced depending on what we're attending to and how we're feeling emotionally in that moment.
And this is exactly one of the areas we'll be exploring together in this group, how to work with attention in a way that helps to reduce the distress, and how in that way you would feel more in control. Sometimes that will mean learning to shift our attention kind of from internal sensations to external. Other times it might mean gently bringing our attention to the here and now, what's happening in the present moment, using tools like mindfulness and grounding. And these are some of the practical strategies that we will be teaching and practicing in this session.
Now, remember what we said earlier, that the gate to how much physical distress we experience can also open or close depending on how we feel. And how we feel is very often linked to what we think and what we do. This is exactly where cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, comes in.
So for those of you who are maybe not be familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for short, it's a framework that helps us understand emotional distress as something shaped by the interaction between what we think, what we do, and how we feel in our bodies. And over time, we develop patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior that are designed to help us manage these difficult emotions. But sometimes these patterns can actually create feedback loops where the strategies we use to cope end up maintaining the problem rather than resolving it. And these loops are often move in a circular fashion. So you can imagine thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and behaviors are linked together like parts of a chain. And if one part of the chain is set off, then it triggers the rest of them off, creating a reinforcing cycle.
The good news is that, according to CBT, if our emotional distress is influenced by how we think and how we behave and how we interpret our physical sensations, then we have a way in. If we begin to shift our thinking or change our responses, even slightly, the whole system can start to soften and the distress can lessen. It's also worth noting that the NICE guidelines on managing menopause recommend CBT as a complementary treatment, particularly beneficial for managing mood-related symptoms and improving overall quality of life during menopause.
And today we wanted to give you a little bit of a snippet of how we will begin to work with our thoughts in order to change how we feel. In a moment, Idyli and myself are going to role play a scenario to help this bring a little bit more to life. But first, I want you to imagine the following situation. So imagine a woman in a very responsible position at work. She's in the middle of delivering a very important presentation to her team, senior colleagues, and right in that moment, she begins to experience a hot flush. And as the heat rises in her body, her attention is pulled inwards towards that sensation. And she starts to focus on this. And because her attention is shifting inwardly to that physical symptom, she might start to stumble on her words a little bit. And then her negative thoughts started kicking, and she would be thinking, oh my God, I must look very sweaty. I'm stumbling on my words. Everyone's going to think I'm incompetent. And I want you to imagine the emotions that this woman must be feeling in that moment. So most likely, anxiety will be the prominent one. And when we feel anxious, our fight or flight kind of response kicks in. And this will bring on its own its set of physiological changes. And these will be kind of heart palpitations or kind of shortness of breath. And importantly here, feeling hot. So now on top of the hot flash, we've got the feeling hot from the anxiety response. And combining the two, you can understand that the situation worsens. Now, the more she focuses on these sensations, these physical sensations, the more intense they will feel. And the more she thinks about how others might perceive her negatively, as sweaty, confused, incompetent, the more anxious she becomes. Now, also imagine there might be secondary distressing feelings at present. So, for example, frustration with her body's questionings like, oh my God, why is this happening now? Did it have to happen now? Or could it not pick a different time? And a sense of hopelessness. So it's like, oh my gosh, how much longer do I have to live with it? I can't do my role. I can't live my daily life. And now imagine the physiological impact of the secondary distressing emotions. So everything becomes a reinforcing loop, effectively. The physical symptoms, the anxious thoughts, the heightened emotions, the increased symptoms. And let's look at what we can do about that. So me and Idyli are going to kind of role play, and we're going to go straight in. So you know the scenario, you know how this woman must be feeling, and Idyli is going to be the woman in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go straight in. So in that moment, then, all you're thinking is how others are looking at you and how they are perceiving you.
That's right. Yeah.
And what are the prominent thoughts in that moment?
Um, I'm not good enough. I'm not competent. People can see that.
And from what you said, that brings both the anxiety, like, oh my gosh, how am I perceived? And it also brings us like, oh, for God's sakes, why now?
Yeah, a mixture of feelings, really. Anxiety, frustration, disappointment in myself that I cannot control that a little bit better.
So then you have all those in that moment. And from what we said, do you see that because of all these emotions, then the physical sensations worsen in that moment?
Mm, definitely, yeah. Yeah. And it's really hard to focus on what I'm saying or the content of my presentation because all I can think about is that frustration or the symptoms that are feeling bigger and bigger in my body.
Yeah, well, that's understandable, isn't it? All your attention is there. It's quite impactful and intrusive in that moment. Okay. So let's think about your thoughts a little bit. So if we take one, the I am incompetent one. So apart from stumbling on your words in that moment, and apart from not being able to concentrate on what you're doing, what are the evidence that tells you that you're incompetent in your role?
Overall, or just in that moment?
Let's think in that moment.
Okay. Um, yeah, it's mainly how it feels. I don't feel confident. That's the main thing that leads to that thought, I think. I don't have any external information in that moment that confirms that in any way.
Okay. And if we take that outside of that moment and we put
Mm-hmm.
it overall, in terms of your role, what's the evidence that you're seeing that tells you, gosh, I'm not competent?
Mm. Um, Maybe the fact that certain tasks might take a little bit longer to be completed because of challenges in my concentration or these uncomfortable physical symptoms. Certain tasks, like, for example, sending an email or completing a report, they might take longer than before to be completed because I might pause, I might rethink what I want to include, what I want to write twice.
Okay. So the evidence that you're getting that you're not as competent is part of is how it feels.
Mm.
And then the other part of it is that it takes longer.
Some
Okay.
things take longer, yeah.
And because it takes longer, it doesn't mean that you don't complete the tasks.
I do complete all my tasks at work. Yeah.
Okay. So if we're thinking about evidence against this thought that you're
Mm-hmm.
incompetent in your role, then we've got one part that it says, actually, I do complete my tasks.
Mm,
I fulfill my role,
that's right, yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else that tells you that you're not incompetent?
Mm. I suppose the feedback that I get from work, recently I had my annual review with my
Hmm.
manager. The feedback was really good. It
Okay.
hasn't changed from previous years, really. So I still get positive feedback. I still perform quite well. I don't have any additional evidence that I'm not competent anymore.
Okay. So the evidence is feeling and it takes longer, but actually, what we kind of seen is that you do fulfill your tasks
Mm,
and you do get positive feedback from others in terms of how you're performing. Okay.
that's right, yeah.
So if we marry the two together, the part about the evidence for this thought, why this thought is true, and then against why this thought is not true, and we put them together, wouldn't it look like things take me longer than it used to be? And I may have lost kind of my confidence in my abilities slightly, but actually my performance is good and I do complete my tasks.
Mm.
Is
And I
that
still
right?
get positive feedback. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good summary.
Okay. So in the original thought, I'm incompetent, we've identified feelings of hopelessness, frustration, and anxiety.
Mm.
So if we group them all as distress, out of 100, how much keenly did you feel those symptoms?
The feelings,
Yeah.
the anxiety, it was, yeah, really intense. I would say
Okay.
maybe 95%.
Okay.
And maybe frustration and disappointment, 70%.
Yeah. I want you to keep in mind what we said about obviously that those heightened feelings would also heighten the physical sensations. Okay.
Mm.
So when we're thinking about this, the anxiety is 90%, and then we've got everything else, the hopelessness. Um, And then when we're thinking about this balance thought that we've created, that yes, things take me longer and I might feel less confident, but actually I do fulfill all my tasks. So when we're thinking about it that way, how much anxious are you feeling?
Mm. Yeah. It's really reassuring, actually, to acknowledge that the feedback that I get is still really positive. So, yeah, maybe 20%.
So that's a big shift, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay. Thank you, Ilia. Okay. So what I want kind of all of you to place particular attention to how this thought affected how this woman felt, the original negative thought, and how the emotional distress shifted when we balance this thought. And since our emotional arousal can affect our thinking and reduce our problem solving abilities, by allowing less emotional distress, she can then start thinking about, okay, how can I problem solve this situation? She can do that more freely. In that moment, she can start diverting her attention from fixating on her kind of the warmth in her body to taking a sip of water, going back to her slides, kind of focusing her attention on her presentation. So effectively, the attentional focus and the cognitive reframing can reduce the distress of menopausal symptoms, can reduce the emotional and then hence the physiological. And I hope that was useful in terms of demonstrating how it can be achieved.
Following the end of this video, I would like to encourage you to start a process of monitoring your own thoughts. Start writing them down when you experience distress, any type of distress. Then I would like you to consider whether you recognize any of the following 4 very frequent and helpful thinking patterns. Number 1, black and white thinking. Thinking in extreme ways that represent the 2 ends of the same continuum. For example, good or bad, success or failure, ugly or beautiful. Number 2, strict rules containing words such as I have to, I should, I need to. Of course, we all want to have a sense of direction in life, and it's important to have preferences and opinions. However, these rules often come with lack of flexibility, and any exceptions to the rule often trigger self-doubt or a sense of guilt. Number 3, self-criticism and self-blame, strict judgments about ourselves and a lack of a kind, supportive voice towards oneself. And number 4, mental filter, biased attention towards certain parts of reality, usually the negative parts of reality. For example, ignoring compliments, ignoring positive moments, moments of resilience, and focusing instead on criticism or just the difficult, challenging times. Can you start approaching your own thoughts with curiosity, starting from today?
And we think that would be really useful. So what does the group can offer in summary? So we've got a small group of up to 10 people, which we would aim to provide a more personalized experience. And you'll be learning coping strategies to manage change. We often get asked, is attending a one-off intervention enough to bring about change? And the answer is actually no. Just like every new skill, we need to practice in order to master it. So we'll be working with you on how to learn and apply these strategies, and we'll be alongside you to help you keep your motivation going, including offering supportive materials to reinforce what you're learning in each session. You can also expect a supportive peer environment of women going through the same transition in their lives. And our aim is that you will leave this workshop with a clearer understanding of distress and symptoms and how to manage them. Ultimately, we hope that your emotional well-being will be strengthened and that you feel better equipped in dealing with whatever is coming your way.
Last but not least, let's talk about the cost of our 6-week program, Rebalance and Renew, a CBT approach to menopause. We tried our best to make this group as accessible as possible to women, considering our years of experience as therapists, the time we invested developing the program, and the time required to run it. At the moment in the UK, the average fee for a CBT individual session lasting 50 to 60 minutes is £100. We decided to offer 90-minute sessions run by two therapists for a fee of £85 each. In other words, if you were to complete this program outside of this group in a one-to-one session, it would cost you £600 for 6 50-minute sessions. Instead of that, the cost of our 6-week program will be £510 for 6 90-minute sessions. Considering that women nowadays might pay around £85 for a massage or a facial that could last for less than 90 minutes, we really hope that women will also invest in their mental health in a similar way by attending our 6-week program.
For sure. So if you found this information helpful, either for yourself or someone you know, please email us using the contact details shown here. We'd love to hear from you, and we're really looking forward to working with you and making your menopausal journey not only less difficult, but also an opportunity for reframing, empowerment, and personal growth. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye all.